Welcome back, everybody, to the Core Growth Show. Delighted to have my next guest in Jason Lear, who is a behavioral leadership consultant, business owner, looking at everything around behavior science and industries. He has over 20 years of experience working in sport, special education needs, youth programs, and just man does everything. I was recently at his TEDx talk in Black Mountain that he was the organizer of, and it was an absolutely amazing day. So first and foremost, Jason, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, I suppose. Yeah.
Well,
great.
And tell us a little bit more about behavior leadership. It's something maybe I've come across quite recently only. So explain, what is it?
Well, I think realistically, we're all trying to change behavior in some shape or form, no matter whether you're looking at aberrant behaviors or even high performers. You're still looking to change behavior to find incremental improvement. So to some degree, we're all behavioral scientists in the sense of we're all analyzing and trying to understand behaviors to get improvements or change behavior or get rid of bad habits and things like that. So it's what I would class as sort of the leadership side of that is really getting into understanding why behaviors happen and then trying to shape the environment. I often talk, and anybody that knows me, I'm actually writing about this at the moment, is I call it the environment wins. And it's very much around how you shape that environment to get the behaviors you want. It's that you could, like, some of the worst behavioral leadership you'll see is in architecture, where you'll have a door that you need to push and there's a pull handle on it. So everybody pulls the door. So what that door is asking in terms of a behavior is pull me. It's not asking me to push you. And it's those sorts of things. And you can start to look at that simple example there and then start to sort of think of how is this environment asking somebody to behave. Simple movement of furniture can change the dramatics of people's behavior unbelievably.
That's amazing. That's a great way to actually summarize it, because I think anybody who's listening to this has went and done that with that push pull. So everybody can relate. So look, I know that you're this is where you're currently at, but you've got a lot of youth programs. You've worked in sports, special educational needs, but you're very entrepreneurial. You're always expanding, always trying new things. For anybody listening, where did that start?
Interestingly, I left school with no qualifications per se. I had a couple of sort of low attainment GCSEs. Grew up in Wales and met a girl in Cyprus and moved to Belfast in 93. Ended up working in the motor trade, and I suppose a bit of a sort of topsy-turvy different jobs in that space, but always in that commercial motor trade, and ended up working in a very senior management role in the motor trade. Now, I wasn't a mechanic, but I understood. Obviously, you develop a lot of knowledge around fitting times and things like that. And I can remember, even at that early stage, sitting and asking myself, how can these two guys go on the same training course, do exactly the same training, it's exactly the same vehicle, yet it takes one person 2 hours and another person 3 hours to do the same job? What? And I started to ask a lot of questions around that. And I think I've always been a wee bit analytical in the way that I look at things. So my mum tells some funny stories about coming home from work and the TV being stripped down and me trying to work out how they got people into the back of it as a kid. So I always wanted to understand why things worked. And during that period then, we started to break down and analyze I suppose, behaviors of our mechanics in terms of why does one person fit in one way? Why does one person fit or take a different amount of time? And during that period, we established, it wasn't as quick as I'm telling you, it was over a longer period of time. But what we started to establish was that they'd all developed, or they'd all built the same habits because they all went to the same colleges or had the same training course. And what we mean by the habits is that the habits that they develop in a service is they all change the oil, they change the filter, they check the brakes. So they all had this habitual sense of this is what I do. But what we found the difference was in their rituals. And what I mean by that is that we all get up in the morning and brush our teeth and get a wash, but some of us do it in a different order. And what that means is one might be quicker than the other. And we started to look at this and then go, well, if Paul can fit a clutch in a Mercedes Sprinter van in 2.5 hours, why is it taking Brendy 3.5? So we started to get the guys to watch each other do jobs when one was slower than the other. And it was only one of the guys actually come up to me after letting him watch. We had a particular mechanic at the time by the name of Paul, and he was so efficient at fitting clutches into Mercedes Sprinter vans. He could do it like in 2.5 hours, and everybody else is taking 3.5, 4 hours. And I put a boy within Brendy, and Brendy went down, and Brendy come up to me into the reception and says, Jason, have you seen the way he fits a clutch? And I went, well, he says, not the way we've been taught. And I went, well, he says, yeah, he does it. And I went, Brendy, I have 2 questions for you. He says, is it safe? Yeah. Can you do it that way? Yeah. Away you go. And that's when we started to look at the behaviours of all that, and we started to break down every job that way. Yeah. And it just went into the system. And I was very much really enjoyed sport at the time, so I started to analyse sport and things that way as well, analytically. Got involved. I was a good friend of Frankie Wilson, former, he was with Bangor Football Club at the time. And I started to do some analysis with Bangor Football Club for Frankie. And I think that at the time when we started, they were second from bottom. And within 11 games, we'd come second in the league. And that wasn't that, like, I done nothing unusual, nothing mad, or it wasn't me. I always keep saying this, like, if you think of 1,000-piece jigsaw, I was maybe a piece that was missing.
Yes.
And it just made a bit more sense to what you were trying to build. So I started to show players through video technologies, illustration with Frankie, show them some things that, behaviours that they didn't realise existed. And we have an example that the Belfast Telegraph wrote about was when we conceded a goal to Banbridge and everybody blamed a particular player. But when we analysed it, it was about 5 events prior to that actually caused the problem. But we were all hyper-focusing on the one person that missed the tackle. But when we started to strip the problems down that way, we could solve them, and it changed the behaviours of players, and they just become more informed. And that's the only way to describe it. So their behaviours change much quicker into not making as many mistakes, thinking about mistakes. So we call it prompting and nudging. So they just nudge themselves into better positioning and things like that. And that was really it. And that has grown then. And I took that knowledge, and every time I have gone into an industry, I've carried that with me around, analyse the environment, understand the behaviours that are taking place, and then look to how you shape or change the environment to get the behaviours you want.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and I suppose the question would be was that always like a passion, or were you just following intuition? You said you're very inquisitive as young, and it seems like that's carried on throughout your career. Is it a mixture of both, or is it one or the other?
Yeah. I think in the early days, it would have been more intuitive in that I was asking questions, and I'm always very curious of, if somebody can perform something at a very high level, I want to know why that is, or what are the ingredients into that mix, and what makes that happen, and can it be replicated? And that's where I went in. I think went from just thinking, oh, look, I can make this work in a management, if I'm in a management role, or if I'm in a sports role, I can add a bit of a mix in here that seems to improve performance. And it then went into me studying human behaviour, studying how we can use data and technology. One of the good things is this, I suppose, the unintended consequence or benefit to me at that stage was 20 years ago, we were using technology, video technology, video analysis, data analysis. We were using that way before it was a thing, I suppose. And I become very good at using a lot of this tech. So I actually still teach a bit in tech now as well, where people will ask me and I go, well, I can show you how to do that. And it was just skills that we picked up. I went back and done like a postgrad in audio post-production, just simply because we wanted to improve the quality of the footage and videos and learning material we're presenting to players and stuff. And that's just carried on then into every role or every training environment I've been in. And I think then it was that stage where, right, as I'm studying this, how do I had some, not, it was, I think it was more for other people, because people were saying, well, what have you done in this space? So I went back and done a master's then in behavioural analysis. And that was more to validate for other people than it was for me. Having said that, I learned an awful lot. It validated some stuff that I was already doing, but it hugely expanded as well what I knew about functions of behaviour and stuff like that. And that's when really pennies started to drop for me, that I was going, I could see that and I was guessing why it was happening. Now I can tell you why it's happening. And I think that was the real thing around that higher level of education really sowed a seed for me in terms of being able to say, I can now do the research to back up what I'm actually doing, what I'm saying.
Yeah, very interesting, because you said, like, you walked away from school with very little qualifications, and I think my education nearly started after university, because I was still only finding myself.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people will turn around and say, you don't need education, you do need somewhere very academic. But what you were doing was, again, that jigsaw, you were putting it together. Yeah. And it was just, I suppose, did you go in at the start with, I suppose, validation? Was it more so to help with the ego to say, well, I need to say it's on here? Or was it that I've been asked for this, if I want to do this job, or people are questioning it, I know I can do it, but I just need a piece of paper to confirm it?
It was very interesting, because I suppose I had mixed reasons why I'd done it, because at that stage I was self-employed and I was doing quite well in terms of, I designed what we were doing. There were no qualifications for. The only qualification available was being delivered out of Cardiff University, which was a master's in performance analysis.
Yeah.
And there was nothing at that sort of level 1, 2, 3, vocational levels of learning. So I designed the first level 3 in sports performance analysis at the time, got it recognised by an awarding body, and we then went on a journey all around England delivering this as a qualification. So it was very interesting. We had a lovely footprint all around sport with some very interesting people, because you had people that were taking the same journey as me, had maybe been football players or coaches and really enjoyed this analytical side, and then started coming on our course. So like people like Steve Brown, who was then head of analysis for Manchester United, was on one of my courses, and it's lovely to have that footprint. And then Sir Alex Ferguson, right? It's actually Steve Brown gets a mention in his book.
Yeah.
When he wrote it, and I'm going like, that's lovely to think that man sat in front of me at some stage, even to the point I done a lot of work with Clifford Adams at Ballymena Football Club, and like I say, then worked with Stephen McCluskey and Northern Ireland Judo and his Judo Academy. So everything from having people like Steve Brown on your course, and Peter Booker at Luton Town was on those sorts of guys, and then being able to say you have a touch point at the very lowest levels of sport, the entry levels as well, was brilliant to see them all coming together to look at this as a concept. And we were being quite successful, but I kept just felt there was something missing, because we were still very data focused at that time.
Okay.
And I started to question whether we were starting to create more problems than solutions in presenting data to players, because what we realize is that good athletes are very hungry for information. They want feedback. They want the coach to tell them, why am I not being picked? What do I need to do better to get selected? If I am selected, can I improve? And what we were then doing was presenting them with lots of information. You made 6 tackles, you missed 3 tackles, you made 25 passes. And what I started to notice was, it was actually passionate Welshmen, Welsh rugby team were doing very, very well. And I started to question whether the stats were getting in the way of performances when I started to watch them, because I started to notice players were making funny decisions. And there was Gary Gold was an analyst at the time for South African rugby. And Gary Gold made this video about a rugby player called Heinrich Brusso. Now, a lot of people won't know, he played open side flanker for South Africa, only on several occasions. But I watched this video, and it was Heinrich Brusso making decisions that other players wouldn't normally make. So there was an option on the pitch to make a tackle. But you would actually see Bruce physically grab another player and push him into the tackle zone. And when the tackle was being made, Bruce would go and steal the ball. And so his job was to jackal the ball. That was his main role. But and I'm going, that's a guy that doesn't care about the stats. That's a guy that doesn't care that he's not making the tackles. His job is to steal the ball. So he created the environment to steal the ball. Whereas I found then I'm thinking, if we keep telling players that you're being measured by how many tackles you make, do they then start making bad decisions about going in for tackles that don't, you know what I mean? These start unintended consequences. So you start telling players, oh, you only run 5 kilometers. Well, you're not here to run a marathon.
Yeah.
If you only run 5 kilometers but are very effective and efficient in your role, if you only run 1, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So I started then look at this concept of behavior has more to play in this than the numbers, and they both work in synergy. And that's when I went back and studied the real behavioral science and behavioral analysis. And when you stitch the two together, you really do have. So I don't think of myself as a purist in terms of behavioral science, because I believe in the value of the data and the two, and sometimes the truth's a bit in the middle,
Yes.
but when you use both in combination, you can get some really powerful outcomes.
It's very interesting because, again, that would be my field as well. Like, I've strength and conditioning coach for years with Northern Ireland set up, and then with the senior team as well, and then my own influence from playing sport. Like, that was always the big thing. We used to have GPS, used to have your metrics, and like, if the manager asked you what it was, I says, I can manipulate this any way you want. It was more like a psychological tool at times. Yeah. And then you're playing, you're guessing. I remember it was with the Northern Ireland senior team, and you talk about data and information. And I ended up doing a talk once, probably honest, because it was a bit of imposter syndrome with me. I was brought into this environment where I'm now taking these players, and I probably had, oh, hold on a minute, I need to do something here. So I ended up running a workshop on sleep. And it's very interesting. At the very end of it, the first person to come up and ask me a question after it was Steve Davis. Because you said he was hungry. Yeah. He was like, oh, I can't really sleep at night after the games, but I take away those caffeine shots. And I said, well, that's okay, because you are doing that for performance related. Our thing is then we move training a little bit later so boys can get sleep. And we were looking at different metrics like that. And it was just very interesting. And even personally from myself, when I was playing a Gaelic background, and we were using performance sports way back then. There was a guy, Leo Green, with us, and he used to send me videos. This was in probably from around 2014 or so. But I had a role of mark our best player, just go for it. And I used to get these videos collaged together, and this was the first time I ever got this. But for me, that was mental rehearsal. I didn't even realize I was doing it that time. Like, I'd sit at night watching it, and I knew I had that person beat me before I stepped onto the pitch. Then for me, the question would be as well too, we have all this data, we have all these performance metrics. Does personality play a part?
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting people you can study, or periods of sport that you can study, is Sir Clive Woodward's World Cup winning team, when he, in that early era of professional rugby, that what he done was professionalize the backroom when everybody else were just paying wages. We were still working of a forwards coach, a backs coach, and a fitness coach, whereas Clive Woodward went and built a team. He had nutritionists, he had chefs, he had this whole backroom, but he built a process and system that was really built around understanding each individual, their personalities, and how they fitted into the group as well. He called it teamship and things like that. So, and it was those elements where sometimes you have to sack your best player.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You heard Chris Coleman talk about it when he was at Sunderland, that sometimes you have to understand is if you have somebody that is causing the team not to gel, that you have to make decisions around that. So I think personality does have a huge role to play in things. Some people take better to the analysis than others as well, because some people can what tends to happen, like from the scientific side of things, what tends to happen is we start to label our performance. So if I make a pass, then rather than see it for what it is, what I tend to do is give it a label. So that was, so you start to make statements. That was rubbish. Oh,
Yeah.
that was an awful pass. I didn't make. Whereas really what it was either short, wide, too long, or on target. And what tends to happen is, as human beings, we start to give things labels, and those labels are just biases in our head of, we use terms like rubbish. But what that tends to happen then is we start to generalize those labels into, that was rubbish, I'm rubbish.
Yes.
I'm not great at that type of pass. Whereas if you see it for what it is, you can use every event as feedback. So if you just turn around and say, that was short, that was wide, that was long, just see it for what it is, you can then try to correct that rather than carry the extra weight. Because when you carry the extra weight of a label, what starts to happen, I think this is where people really don't understand the elements of trying to, especially in physical things, that whenever you're getting feedback and you're giving yourself feedback, the physiological side is massive. Because when I'm telling myself that's rubbish, I'm also tensing up. I'm also I'm starting to, grip the fist, and I'm doing things. So I'm recruiting muscles that don't need to be involved in this process. So the next time I then overtry and things like that. So it's that element of trying to get you into the space of mind of stop labeling it, see it for what it is, and just play naturally, just do things naturally. And that's the same in business. I think, responding to emails and things too quickly sometimes.
I remember taking our club as well, we were doing a bit of analysis, and I'd always ask a question at times too, what did you see there? Was it actually the idea or the execution?
Yeah.
Maybe they had the right idea, maybe they didn't execute it well enough. So rather than saying blaming execution, saying, well, how can we do that better? Because your idea and creativity was right.
Yeah.
So, because then we don't want to curb that. We don't want to curb that creativity. And as you said, that works in business and sport and family and life. And that for me was kind of a big one. And I also remember listening to Gareth Southgate on a podcast. And he said something really good about behavioural and stuff. He goes, during his meetings, he's the last person to speak.
Yeah.
Because he gets the rest of his coaching staff and team to come up with their opinions, rather than him saying something and then people just backing it up. And I always remember that too when I was coaching and the manager was there, Gary Benning dad. And it was at that stage I said, take your ego out of it. If you have nothing to add, that's okay. Because sometimes I remember being there as a player going, oh, here we go again.
I use a phrase called the hippo. So don't be a hippo. People say, what do you mean? So don't be the highest individual paid person's opinion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good. Yes.
So if you're a hippo, if you go into a meeting, and I always say, think about this. This is one of the good examples I give in business when I'm speaking in sort of leadership roles. And I'll say to people, right, if you're a leader and you go into a meeting and you are the highest individual paid person, if you share your opinion first, you've got to remember, you've 10 people in this room. You're responsible for their performance reviews. You're responsible for their potential increments in pay. What will happen is you will start to get a groupthink. Now, unless you have somebody with a strong personality who's willing to contradict you, generally what happens is I'm going to shape my opinion, even though it might be different, in some way of sounding similar to yours. I want you to agree with me because we're all looking for agreement. But if you go in there with an opinion, but the last to speak, your opinion may change by the end of that meeting. So the idea is you go in, get the feedback first, ask the question to the audience, and then share, well, do you know what I was thinking? But now you have maybe challenged me.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And that way, and so some of the research I done years ago, if you look at the Challenger disaster, that was based on a hippo. That was based, if you look at why that shuttle exploded, there was a low-level engineer in Thiokol who pointed out those sails aren't rated to operate at those temperatures. If you send that rocket up, it's going to blow up. And he was pushed in. He was actually told by the hippos, stop thinking like an engineer, and start thinking like a manager. And so you got this groupthink where people started to agree, and they launched, and the disaster happened. And that was solely because people were speaking first, were telling people what to think,
Yeah.
not asking. They didn't want an opinion, because the opinion would have went against budget constraints and all that sort of thing. There was a lot of pressure on to get that thing up, and his opinion was not valued at that stage. So it's those sorts of things when, especially in a leadership role, you have a responsibility to hear what the others say first and then share your opinion. So the phrase, it was a lady at a conference, and I can never remember her name, and she used that phrase called the hippo, and I've used it ever since, and I thought it was brilliant. The highest individual paid person's opinion.
Sums that up really well. There's so many golden nuggets out there and putting it all in. But even when you're in that situation, like I know myself, even with the team, this is where you have to self-reflect a lot, and you have to be willing to take it in first, to process. It's like ready to listen. It's the big thing, I suppose, is the next. For you to do that, you have to be ready to listen without any opinion. Have you worked with clients when they've been like, we actually shifted the right way because I listened to?
Yeah, I think whenever, example, I suppose, is working with some young people, where I went into an organization years and quite a while ago, and they had a program with young people, 16 to 24, SEN environment. And they were delivering an old, to be fair, say an old style qualification. It only changed this year. It's been updated. But they were delivering this qualification very traditionally, and it was an essential skills IT qualification. And I can remember going into the environment, and they had this curriculum, and they were just following the curriculum, and they had poor retention and all that sort of thing. And literally what I done was sat down with the young people and says, what do you want to learn? You know what I mean? Listen to what they like to do. Listen to the things of how they would like to express themselves. So the old idea of student voice, listen to what they have to say, and they say, right, how do we fit that into this curriculum? How do we take what you want to do and now say, well, I need to teach X, Y, and Z, but how do I create it with yours? And what we learned was all they wanted was to be able to express themselves and talk. So we took an old dried up qualification and we flipped it into them being able to podcast, videography, photography, go out on walks, express themselves. So they created projects where they went out and expressed themselves, and then they come back and we said, right, how do we take that now and put it on a spreadsheet? How do we now take that and write up a report about it? So we were still learning the key things of being able to use Microsoft Word, being able to use spreadsheets and things like that. We just took projects that had nothing to do with the curriculum, but created the data and experience we needed to do those projects. So we literally, what seemed like we were adding extra work was that we actually added in engagement. It wasn't extra work.
And it's all project-based learning. He's actually running a number of summer camps as well. He's running one same time as ours in one of the beaches in Rosnila, and it's so unique what he's teaching. Like, he's taking themes like the Stone Age, and he's doing it through project-based learning. And he has a lot of SEN kids in his program as well, because they're just neurodiverse and they learn a different way. Sometimes we always go by the manual, and it's even with me, with our coaching, like our biggest philosophy is positive experiences. Children, nobody can have a neutral experience, so a positive or negative. And one way in which we do this is ask questions, just like you're saying. We're going to do an underarm throw. Does anybody know what an underarm throw looks like? And go express yourself. And then, okay, how can we make it easier? How can we make it harder? Could anybody do it this way? And when I'm doing a lot of staff training in schools, I'll go and I'll ask, does anybody know Paula Radcliffe? What was her running style? Scotty Scheffler's the number one golfer in the world. Everybody's now trying to break their ankle on the driving range because that's how he follows through. So sometimes the textbooks are there as a bit of a guideline, but we have to have the courage and creativity. And you mentioned there a bit of work with youth. So you started the motor industry, you're working a lot in sport. You did a lot of work now, and you continue to do with a lot of youth programs. What's the main driver for that? Is it just a natural transition, or was there something that spurred that on?
It's very interesting you asked that, because I always used to think of this thing about giving back. I always used to think about, if I had that when I was growing up, it would have helped me. So I'm going to put that there, sort of thing. I think of I grew up in a sort of deprived area of Wales where job opportunities were very, very limited. In terms of facilities, it was two jumpers in the middle of the road as goalposts, and you had to stop the cars coming through your
Game
goalpost
off.
whenever so we didn't have an awful lot in that sense, but that's just the way it was. And sometimes I think it'd be nice to go back there for our youth today, because the challenges of tech and social media on our young people, I think, is one of the biggest historically one of the biggest challenges we're ever going to face, I think, with young people at the moment, because of the disconnection with social abilities, because of these devices. And I sometimes think, that boy tooting at you and shouting at you to get you off you learned how to negotiate even with a man driving a car who's trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At a very young age. Yes, mister, can you just give us 5 minutes? We have a penalty shootout. It's those simple things like that we're missing today. And as I was looking at that, I was thinking, this is my opportunity. I've some things that I think young people might be interested in, some unusual routes into different career paths that I've been, and I can just share those opportunities, how I done it, and tell them that I have no regrets of leaving school with no qualifications. Because I think that was a key thing for me. Would I do it if I got a second opportunity to do it? I often say, no, I wouldn't change it, because it's made the person I am today.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would advise younger people is take the opportunity to learn at a much earlier age. What that looks like doesn't have to be university. It doesn't, just take the opportunity to learn as much as you can, whether that's reading books, listening to podcasts, wherever it might be. Take the opportunity to purposely learn something at a much earlier age than what I did, because I was sort of that mid-20s before I'd realised I do really need to put some effort into education.
Yeah.
And valued education as a thing that is valuable. And I think that's something that we still have problems with societal-wise, because we have so many young people in my mindset still, and that's 30 years on, 40 years on, and there's still people that feel the same way as I did 30 or 40 years ago, that I don't like school, I'm not enjoying school. But nobody's asking why. It's like, well, you have to learn maths and English, which is fair enough, but sure, you can make that a bit more exciting. And an example of that, I can remember going to Corpus Christi School, and I was asked to Minta Murray had asked me to go there, and we had a group of young people that he would say were presenting challenging behaviours, and about half an hour in the lesson, we had them all asking how to work out percentages in maths, and some of the teachers were going, how did you do that? What we'd done was stuck GPS units on them, went and had a game of soccer, come back in, downloaded the data. These kids were now interested because they were their numbers, they weren't yours.
Yes. They had ownership of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do I work out speed, maximum speeds and all this? So it was those sorts of things. And I was thinking all this time, I'm giving back. I'm feeling great. And, in February this year, I went to an event. It was an MLN event down at the Titanic Run, and Mary Robinson was speaking at it. And Mary Robinson spoke about, I think it was Article 29 of the Human Rights Act, which she was a co-author of. And she turned around and talked around that everybody has a duty within their community to make.
Yeah.
And I went, no, that's why I do it, because it is, you do have a duty to your community, where that is and how that looks. I think we all do. And that sort of closed that out for me in terms of, yes, there's a sense of personal pride in trying to do something and give young people different opportunities. But the reality is, it's my responsibility as well. I've had some opportunities. I've done well out of some opportunities. Why should I keep that to myself? My job is to inspire the next generation, not to keep them down. I'm not there to beat them.
Whenever you reflect back, you realize the people that were already doing that to you, to give you the opportunity as well. He inspired you by doing that as well. I always say it to people too. People think like what I'm doing or what I continue doing is like, a bit like yourself. You use the word responsibility. I believe we're all here to serve. We're all here to give. But you naturally do. It's the laws of the universe. It's whatever way you want to look at it. But you give without the intention of getting back, because you're there to serve.
I think the question sometimes you have to ask yourself, what are you looking back? Because I think the problem with society is at the moment, and I don't mind. I don't know how I would describe myself, a social capitalist, maybe. I don't know. What is that? That I have social values, but I don't mind people making money either. I think we have certain aspects of our society that have way too much money, and I think there's societal problems with that. And we have to find a way of balancing that. But I do think there's nothing wrong with people making income because they take risks to do that. But I also see the social side of it. And I sometimes think now that we have anchored everything into monetary value. If I do this, I need you to pay me. Whereas realistically is what I'm looking back is maybe that sense of pride. Am I looking back just that I feel that I've done something, that I've contributed? So it's the question I always ask to be is, what do you want back from it? You know what I mean? It's not what you get. We all have something to give. You have to be comfortable with what you're getting back from it. And it was like recently I'd worked with Paul Doherty on that Future Leaders program. And I can remember sitting with him, and my frustration at the moment was at watching a lot of things on social media and stuff. And I'd watched the Manosphere with Andrew Tate and all that sort of stuff. And I was going, but all these things are just telling these young people what not to be, who not to follow. We're just pointing fingers at them. You know what I mean? Don't be following him. Don't be following her. And we were telling these, that whether male or female, our young people, what not to be. And I says, but are any of us actually putting somebody in front of them to show them what they should be? So I remember sitting down with Paul Doherty and I says, Paul, between us, we know a few people. What if we come up with a program, call it Future Leaders? We'll bring young people in. And what I want to do is put a leader in front of them each week. Somebody from our community, somebody that can tell a story about growing up the way they did, but somebody who's now, in their eyes, successful because they built a business, and let them sit and have a conversation with them. 1 or 2 hours each week for 10 weeks, and let's see what we can do. And just by chance, Rory McLaughlin, mystery shirt in a box, done week 1 for me. And he was outstanding because he started his business as a 15-year-old in his bedroom, but he tells a very up and down story of where he is today in a very successful business. And the kids were wow. And they were asking questions, they were inquisitive. And then we brought in, 2 ladies who own one of the biggest marketing agencies in the country, Grow Web, Aideen and Sharif. And they were brilliant. People asking questions then around, you can work globally from a small office in Belfast and things like this. And just each week we put in a new business leader, and the questions that these kids were asking, I was going, this is amazing. But do you know, at the end of that, all those kids were aspiring to be somebody like it in that room.
Yes.
They'd switched off from the social media side of things. They all now had a local person that I know that some of those kids have connected with some of those CEOs and gone out and had coffees with them.
Brilliant.
To ask questions, to be inquiring. And I'm going, that's all we wanted to do with that program. The only outcome was that we changed their thinking a bit. And that was all around the behavior. Is how do we change people's behavior? It's about creating an environment that gives you the best chance of that. And literally that's all we done. And we'll look again at running that again at some stage. Brilliant. Because the outcome was, I think for me, huge in looking at those young people and their growth and development and the feedback we got from them as well.
Because you said there, they're going to be in an environment anyway. They're going to be connected.
Yeah.
It's how they be connected. There's, because of algorithms, there's 2 books, Stolen Focus and The Anxious Adolescence. And both of them all talked about Silicon Valley. And what they actually do with social media, with technology, is they actually prey on our weaknesses. They don't give us what we want. They prey on our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And our weakness is that addiction and that thing. So they're given a platform for these people to turn around and say, this is the right way to do. And it's just the environment. We're creatures of habit. We take the easiest, shortest path. If somebody turns around and says, yeah, we can do this, then we're going to go and do it. Like we all do it ourselves. It's easier to go and get that short-term reward of, something simple as getting a biscuit. Getting addicted then to the social media and everything too. So how now you really feel like behaviour leadership, behaviour science, is it even more important today?
Yeah, because I think there's that what you're talking about is the flip side of what we do. I'm a member of an organisation called GABS, which is Global Association of Applied Behavioural Scientists, and their main focus is on behaviour for good. behavioral science for good is around. We, in the trade, what you were talking about, we call it addictive engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these organizations now use people in behavioral scientists or some sort of scientific environment to create addictions. And that is right in what you're saying. We look at foods, like most foods that we eat are engineered to make us want more of it rather than satiate us, rather than fill us with nutritional good value. You know, I still think we're there where protein is still the new healthy. It's like, I can tell you a brilliant example of this, that I brought over Graham Close and James Morton, two of the top nutritionists in the country. One was with Team Sky at the time, the other boy was with England Rugby. And they come over and done a talk for me to a group of athletes and people working in the fitness industry. And Graham Close presented a PowerPoint slide, which I think is one of the most powerful behavioral change slides I've ever seen in my life. And he put this slide up on, and it was literally him with 20 grams of protein. And he put a picture up of literally dog mess, a lump of dog mess sitting on the slide, and everybody's looking like, what? And he says, what is it? And everybody's going, well, it's dog mess. You know what I mean? And the next thing is he sprinkles 20 grams of protein into it on the slide. You know what I mean? He says, what is it? And everybody's going, well, it's stuff. He says, right. So then he puts a picture up of a packet of crisps and a Mars bar. And he does the same thing, sprinkle 20 grams of protein on it. And he says, what do you have? And he says, you still have a packet of crisps, you still have a Mars bar. What we've done is taken the word protein and turned it into the new healthy. And that's going back 15 years, and we're still in that space of you put the word protein on it and people think it's healthy. And that's just an addictive marketing campaign to change the way that we think, is to get us to buy something that really isn't good for us. You know, it's not healthy. And I think that's a whole other argument of marketing standards and things like that. But even when you look at the scroll on the social media, you know, that was designed by a guy who done the bottomless soup bowl trick, where they were trying to understand how satiated people would become if. So what they done was two groups of people with soup, and one was eating the soup, and it was obviously the bowl was being filled from the top, but the other bowl was being filled from the bottom, so you couldn't see it being filled. And the ones whose bowl was being filled from the bottom almost all the time ate 80% more than the other group.
Yeah.
And what they said was, they called it the bottomless scroll. And that's when they created the bottomless scroll. So the scroll never ends because you don't become satiated. You just keep going. And like you say, what they'll do, it's then like on a slot machine basis. So they give you a reward system, which works on about a 50% win rate. So you'll get something you like. Oh, I like that, bang. And then you don't get any you're interested in for 3 or 4 scrolls. And it's literally based on a slot machine. Bing, 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 bing. Oh, there's something I've just won. Then lost, win. And it just is based on the human nature of addictions.
I think this is a big thing I'd mentioned even before we come on was, especially working with our youth. I was down in Westport House, so during the summer they take on, I think he said like 100, 150 young children to come in. His role was to bridge the gap between that and the senior leadership team as such, and really understand that these children are coming in with additional needs. They're coming in and they are an anxious generation. He was trying to bridge the gap between, we want the senior leadership to understand the young kids, and we want the young kids to understand where the senior leadership are coming from without it being a guessing game in the middle. He was very challenging, and he actually found one of the hardest challenges was changing the mindset of the senior leadership team.
Yeah.
To change their ways. Because their neural pathways have just been developed time after time after time. I'm actually writing about it at the minute too, about physical literacy and the social, emotional, and academic side that it helps. And the social simple thing was, when we were younger, if we wanted to go to our mates, we would call to the house. But you talk about social interaction of knocking the door. Jimmy's not coming out, he's eating his dinner. Right, I'll be back. Okay, you knock again. You might get a frustrated parent. It's only been 10 minutes. Okay, sorry. Look, I'll be back again. And you're negotiating all of this. Yeah. And that anxiety of fear nearly going back to the house. But that happened every single day.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where our children aren't. Like the other day, there's a barista phobia. There was research done that they looked at young adults, now young people, going to coffee shops, ordering on their app, and then collecting because they have the social fear of ordering a coffee. And everything's here. They talk about the young males here now living in their own and loneliness because Deliveroo, Netflix, everything is at a touch of a button.
Yeah.
You don't need to social interact. So what you're doing and the programs that you're running are huge for behavioural change. But is that a drop in the ocean? What do you think needs to happen? What will be some of your advice on that?
I think it's a better understanding of how, but it's a word that we don't like to use in the trade. We tend to prefer the sustain and failure term, which is nudging people. But the real is that the manipulation of people, and we have to understand as leaders that we have to get better at this in the sense of good. And it's like everything is that good versus so-called evil of the world. And how do we get better at manipulating the behaviors that we do want to see against the ones that we don't want to see? The problem, I suppose, today is the way that information circulates, that it travels 10 times or maybe 1,000,000 times faster than it once did. And it's hard to rein in once it's out there, or correct even once it's out there, even if bad or false information's out there. It's very, very challenging to rein that back in because some people will always believe it.
Yes.
And that's a challenge that we're in. So there's a lot of societal problems that we have to make decisions about. What do we want our society to look like? And, even with AI at the moment, how much do we want that to take over our lives? How much do we want it to take over our businesses? And what does that mean in terms of us running businesses and employing people and having those social interactions? I've heard some very interesting conversations about a utopian society where we actually do nothing. But what does that look like for you? Like, how do you create ambitions? How do you create curiosity? What happens there? So, I think is some huge challenges, more for my grandchildren than, I've got to the other side of this, maybe, that yes, I'm going to see some really strange happenings over the next 10, 15 years. But, what the future that my children and grandchildren might have to live with is very, very different to what we had to deal with. And I think much more challenging as well.
And as well to carrying that trauma. And this is where even I was reading some research to saying, why does Ireland have this culture of drink, of addiction?
Yeah.
Leading back to the famine, leading back to war, leading back, it was their coping mechanism at times. Yeah. And that's carried on as that. But it was interesting what you say. There was a friend of mine, Adam, actually on the podcast, and he calls it the Wally generation. Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Wally?
Yeah.
So he works in a lot of youth fitness. He's like, that's what I'm doing. I'm preventing us from turning to the Wally generation, where there was no purpose. There was nothing until they started to see that. And it's interesting what you were doing with that youth program is amazing. But you said that took 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Where a 10-second clip could already alter somebody's decision.
Yeah.
So
that's a massive problem that we have in society at the moment. Like I talk about this even. I think of elections and how social media could determine the outcome of an election, but we won't rerun it. You know what I mean? Like one bad comment 24 hours before we go to the polls, which could be totally false.
Yeah.
Could change the way you vote, and then the following day it can't be undone, and you're going like this whole thing is just such a scary place to be. How do we deal with it? I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that years ago, if I wanted to say something bad or challenge somebody, because I don't think society has changed that much, and that people that do that also existed.
Yeah.
But they couldn't post it in the Belfast Telegraph. They couldn't stick it in a magazine to get the mass audiences. And I think we allow social media companies to get away from the fact that they're actually publishers, because I think they are publishers. They are publishing information on our behalf. And I think they have no liability towards what's being published. Whereas if you were a magazine, you were in fear of, I'm not putting that in my magazine. There's no way I'm getting sued. I'm the editor. I'm the publisher. Yeah. And I think this is where we've got to in terms of social media. And there's another, I always talk about this thing as well. One of the things I always talk around is people talk, free speech. And I go, 100% there's free speech. You can say anything you want. What there is not is freedom of consequence.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to this place where we're confusing free speech with freedom of consequence, where we're actually saying, yeah, you can get away with it a wee bit as well, whereas we need to hold people to account for what they're saying more and call people out for what they're saying more, because it shouldn't be free of consequences. I don't care what you say. You know what I mean? That's on you, but you have to accept there's a consequence to what.
I totally agree. And be ready to be challenged.
Yeah.
Take it and respond. Don't react, respond.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think this is where the thing is, when people are challenged, because they're keyboard warriors, because of this, because of that, I say this, and so they meet somebody face to face and they step back and they challenge it. They're like, you can't say that to me. I was like,
yeah,
well, yes, I can.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reading a book at the minute, was it the Dopamine Nation? And it's very interesting, just about, it's a psychologist who has all these people there with addictions and what our dopamine hit is like and where our stores are and where it goes. And when it all comes back to science as well.
Yeah.
Not only is our behaviour and our social decisions around, but it's based around the science. I'm reading about a lady addicted just to cannabis because she has to go up because it helps curb her anxiety. And they're like, well, the come down from the cannabis is actually increasing your anxiety, and there's this loop, and it's all about this dopamine hit. I put a post up the other day, like, earn your dopamine, like, literally. Where's the thing of getting outside, moving, running? It might just be walking through and sitting, walking on the beach. You're going to get a dopamine hit from that. Your all the neurotransmitters are going to be going through your mind as well and your body, but our dopamine hit comes from, like you said, like that slot machine. Even from scrolling, you don't even realize. It's like every 4 or 5, boom, there's a thing I like.
Yeah.
Go again. There's another thing I like. I'll look at my likes. Somebody give me another like. Yes. Bang, 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 bang. Instant. You don't have to earn it.
Yeah.
Whereas we're in a society now where that's just, it's nearly the norm. And when you do have to do something more challenging and physical, it becomes like too challenging.
Yeah. I think that's one of the easiest ways to explain, I suppose, how that addictive engineering is being used against us. You think of Netflix, even. I would say most of us have Netflix. And years ago, whenever you started to watch a Netflix series, you had to pick the remote up to hit play again to play the next one. Now you have to pick the remote up to stop it. What they worked out was people were watching one series, stopping it, and then waiting for a day or two. So now it's the way things up. The next one will autoplay in 2 seconds, in 5 seconds, in 6 seconds. So now people are spending more time watching because it's that thing of remote. So they sure, I'll just watch the next one. And that's that element of addictive engineering. That's happening in everything that we're doing in terms of people looking scientifically at how they can get us to buy something, do something, eat something. And it is using science against us. But we also are in the ability to use science to the other side of that in terms of getting performance and improving behaviours and changing behaviours and things like that. So that's really what I suppose I try and talk about is if you're working with young people, explain to them how they're so I just give a bit of honest truth in terms of this is how you're being manipulated and start to tell them. So rather than say, look, these guys are doing this, I start to tell them, explain what they do on a daily basis. And they're going like, is he sitting beside me?
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
I mean? And then you say, do you know why that is? And then explain how they got you to do it. And then they go, that is mad. So you sort of, you literally open the curtain behind what the phone that they're using, the foods that they're eating, and things like that. And you start to have those conversations with them. And I think that's where we have to get to, is making these young people so much more aware of how they're being manipulated by people that literally are just making money out of them. Because I suppose one of the first things I say to young people, how many of you play for Facebook, WhatsApp, and so what's for sale? You're for sale. You know what I mean? It's you are the product in that sense. If you're not paying for a service, then you've sold them something. You've given them information that they need, your behaviors they're analyzing. There's something happening in that transaction that is valuable to them, because they aren't doing it just to give you a platform to use. So it's that sort of thing. I'm trying to get them to understand that. And when we get that awareness into these young people, hopefully they start to make better decisions and their behaviors change as well around that. It's the transparency, I think.
I think that's it. And another thing that you've done there as well is you've taken away the blame from them.
Yeah.
They still have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
But you're more or less saying to them, look, it isn't actually your fault.
Yeah.
You're being manipulated.
Yeah.
But it's your responsibility to make a shift.
Yeah.
You can continue to do that, then it's your fault. Now that you're more aware, you have this understanding, knowledge, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy. That's when, even talking to us and constantly, it's easy for us to say it is going to be more challenging to implement. As a societal change, that there is a shift in this generation that are coming up, that they are going back to journaling. Even I suppose way back in the day, it was buying the vinyls were becoming popular again. So there's a societal shift, but the speed in which it's still dragging other people down to that level of manipulation is going to be challenging. I would be correct in saying that, like, you're not really fixated on one thing.
Yeah, I think because of the touch points of behavioural, I suppose those behavioural science, because I talk about it, I see it as a tool more than a thing that I'm always trying to do. Go in and look at, right, what's your challenge and how can we use the knowledge of behavioural science to improve this for you or make the changes that you want. So there's so many touch points with that. Everything that we do on every day, like I said, the way you open a door is a behavioural decision made by an architect at some stage. Like even being able to have that conversation with an architect, because there's been some research on that, and female architects are actually better than male architects at building for functionality. Whereas men, I'll put a handle on because it looks good. A woman's going to go, well, why would you put that there? It's a push door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just, that's a lovely looking handle. We'll get that on there.
Yeah.
It's like those sorts of design thinking in that, and that's behaviors. So everything that we do, there's a guy, B.F. Skinner wrote a book, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to read it. It's called Verbal Behaviour. It was one of the pieces of literature I read for my master's. I actually had to read it twice to understand it. That's how technical the book is. But what he talks about is that everything's verbal behavior. So what he done was broke verbal behavior down into like different operants of man's, intraverbals and all that. Whereas he says it doesn't have to be vocal to be verbal. It's telling you to do something, so it's verbal. So to a person that is mute, you know what I mean? They can't vocalize it, but they still tell you verbally how to do things. And when you start to break behaviors down or society down into what's it asking me to do, you can then go in, well, I can build a performance environment like that. So what is my coach asking me to do? So the way you build, and I think that really when you look at some of the successful teams around the world in sport, so the key areas I've studied would have been originally elite sport. And I started to understand how these teams were being built at the highest levels, the ones that were really successful. And then what I started to notice was patterns between them and the way that we train medical, military, emergency services, pilots. So all the people that have to work at a very, very high sharp end constantly, there's actually a pattern in the way that they train and develop people. And when you start to see that, a lot of it is around understanding the behaviors within that environment, but shaping an environment to get the behaviors they want. So building and shaping that environment. And that's what I talk about. If I want people to go through a particular door, then I can shape the environment. I can put something there to make that happen.
Yes.
So it's like I suppose the other word is choice architecture. What choices do I give them at this stage? And at what time do I want them to challenge that? And what time do I just want them to follow the process? And you can build environments to get people to do things the way you want them to do it. And then have conversations at the right times, at the right moment. And I think that's what some of the best people in elite and high performance environments do. They know when it's valuable to have a conversation and get feed forward and feedback, but they also know how to build an environment to get the behaviors they want to happen most frequently. You know what I mean? I've used some brilliant stuff over the years around, if you're trying to change the way that you eat, there's some studies there where they changed the level of food in a school with young children. So what they done was took all the sweet stuff, put it up high, and brought all the healthy stuff down low, and it increased people eating healthy stuff by 20%, which is massive, in terms of those sorts of studies. And things like that. And like if you're going to go to the gym and you're going to start the gym, then start with a mate and make dates with your mate and say, I'll meet you at 8:00, I'll meet you at 6:00, because we have a habit of letting ourselves down. We don't like them let other people down.
Yes.
So it's things like that. So they say, how do you form a new habit? Well, what you do is make it easy and most likely to happen. So what are those two ingredients that we need? So I always talk about the response. Build a response plan, not a success plan. So we're all taught how to build goals and plans to set goals, but none of us are taught how to respond during that process. So I would be saying, like, if I'm building that leadership program, when I was designing that leadership program, I built what success was, worked my way back, and then I built a response plan. So the response plan is, we have nobody signs up for this. What do I do? One of our speakers don't turn up on one of the evenings, get stuck in traffic. What do I do? So what is my response going to be in the situation? So when it happens, when Jason stood there on his own, no speakers turned up, I'm not rabbit in the headlights. I know what my response is going to be.
Yeah.
And if you actually go in and look at the best in the world in high performance environments, they all have a response plan.
Yeah, I'd like that mental rehearsal of what if.
Yeah.
What if, it was interesting because trying to listen to, I was watching the All-Ireland final, big game, Mayo, Kerry go 1-5 up. But they believed in their process so much, they obviously probably had rehearsed, and they had a psychologist in with them, that they're like, but what if we go one? Do we change the game plan? What do we do? So they didn't get into the situation where they had to force something. They're like, no, we knew this might happen. We stick to the process. Our process works. Our process is brilliant. It's brilliant. Shit, it's not working. What do we do? We've already rehearsed that.
Yeah.
So I remember listening when the strength and conditioning coach was on, and he went, okay, new gym equipment. What do you want? He's like, buy me a couch. He's like, that's the biggest piece of equipment I'll use. He's like, oh, what? Yeah, a couch in my office and an open door. He's like, I'll build a relationship with them. And due to the behaviour, I remember listening to Barry Solon too. He was at Arsenal at the time, and he simple behaviour change. He changed the kettlebells, so he made sure they were all different colours. So because he was dealing with so many different languages, so he was like talking about like Giroud and all. He says, I hated the gym. I like, before you go out, grab the 2 pink ones, do this split lunge 6 times each leg, 3 times, then I'll see you later. He's like, but there was other guys that were sitting down when I was programming and doing everything. And it was those shifts, you think, just in behaviour. They talk, what's it like, I was basically Barclough, the Steve Brailsford, the 1%. And I remember taking teams, everybody's on, oh, the 1%, the 1%. I was like, yeah, but the problem is, don't forget about the 99.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping? Are you eating? How is your mood? Have you got a new baby in the house? Are you not sleeping? Right? The weird situations of that. And there was boys working night shifts and stuff. Don't worry about that collective session there, because I'd rather you sleep. And when we used to play in our club, we used to have a lot of the guys play for the county, and then they had a night off, and boys like, they should be in the sideline watching us. I was like, should they? Who's that going to help?
Yeah.
Who's that help? Just because it's pissing rain down and we think they're watching Champions League at home, that's okay, because they're probably elite athletes, but it's changing that behavior within that to say, look, here's why we're doing this. You know, these guys are highly tuned athletes. They're playing for the county. Where they're going to come back and represent us. If they choose to come down of their own accord, brilliant, because they want to be there and they get to be there. But if they don't and they feel, you know what, I'm just mentally and physically exhausted, their rest is going to be so much better for us in the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is. I think, especially at those lower levels of sport, in terms of the administration of the club and the way it's run and the processes, recruitment and things, they can learn so much from business. Whereas the flip side of that is that businesses, if they can learn so much from what it takes to build a team, that, you know, very few of us, if you have a group of 20 people, 30 people, there's very few of us could honestly say that we have 20 mates in a team, that we have people that maybe don't get on, dislike each other, but on a Saturday, how can these two work their socks off to help each other? And I think that's just that different beast. Like in a business, you find people will do everything they can to undermine the person they don't like, and have conversations. Whereas in sport, it's, I leverage the person that I don't like because we want to win together. And it's a different mentality and things. So I think there's so many elements to that in terms of high performance. And you go, look, there's so much that we can learn from a sporting environment, high performance sporting environments in particular. But the flip side is, well, that business has a lot to offer back the other way in terms of systems and processes, and getting those elements right as well. You know, there's some really good businesses out there as well, that do well. I think our confusion is this word culture, that we confuse the word culture with being nice. And the reality is that culture means responsibility. It's taking responsibility, everybody in their environments taking responsibility and holding each other to account. Poor culture comes from a lack of holding each other account, or fear. You know, fear is the byproduct of bad culture, where I'm afraid to challenge you as my boss because I know you'll then give me rubbish jobs for the next week, or I'm afraid to do something because I'm afraid to report that I've made a mistake because I know you'll hold that against me. It's a huge. There was a lady, Amy Edmondson, done some amazing research in the medical industry, and she was looking at culture within medical teams, and she was looking at patient outcomes. And I suppose the easiest thing for them to target their research in the early days was simply look at the mistakes that they make, and let's understand. But what happened in the early days of the research is they'd identified that the high performing teams were making more mistakes than the poor performing teams. So those that were having more or less favourable patient outcomes were having less mistakes. And when they really started to dig in, what they realised was that was untrue. That the high performing teams were reporting all their mistakes because there was no fear.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas the other teams were hiding their mistakes because they were afraid to report them because of the senior leadership and management. And people will go, you know, so when you see high performance, what you will usually find is that there are mistakes, but we talk about them, we solve them, we resolve them. Whereas in poor performing teams, we hide our mistakes. And that's the starting point for any business. You know, if I'm having a conversation with a business or going into a company, that's one of the first questions I would ask somebody. So if I get access to your employees, first I'm going to say, how comfortable are you with telling your boss that you've made a mistake today? And if they say, no, I wouldn't bother, that's your problem.
Yeah,
No need to go.
Let's not go to the next round and all that.
Yeah. There's no reason for me to get into a deep conversation until we solve that problem. You need to be able to tell your boss, we need to solve those relationships. And that's the first bit, because if you're trying to solve stuff further up the chain, that's always going to undermine you. You're never going to get the outcome. And the problem might be further up. The true problem to what you're trying to solve might be a bit further up the chain. But until we solve that, we can share, we can have honest conversations, we don't hold it against you, that we can make honest mistakes. We have this thing about talking around basic, complex and smart or intelligent mistakes, and we explain what they are, and then you get business into making intelligent mistakes. Every mistake's intelligent, and we get you to that mindset, and that's and that's the thing I think is with people is that we don't understand that breakdown in transparency and communication has a massive effect on overall performance. And I think that's the truth. That's where we have a lot to learn in sport, because the mistakes are laid bare for everybody to see. They happen. So you can't hide from them. We don't hide from them because we have to have conversations about them. It's then how we have conversations decides how well we perform in the retention of players. Because if we're that shouty, horrible environment where players don't want to be with us because they're going to get roasted or they're gonna, you know what I mean? Whereas if it's a environment where we are going on training Monday to solve these problems that we saw on Saturday, then you get the high performance. And realistically, what we need to do is replicate that into a business. We need our mistakes to be laid bare.
Yeah. And you hear a lot of that even in the sport where somebody is given off to you on the pitch. It's because they've got your back more or less.
Yeah.
You get to that stage where I'm comfortable when I got somebody to say,
yeah,
you step left, go you right, why, and you're like, okay, yeah, because I know that you're following the same process as me.
Yeah.
So, and I know now delivery is one thing, is another thing as well, but that's, as long as the message is there. There's so much in that. There's so much there. If people are listening now and they do want to reach out, be it sport, business, anything, just keep update with you. Where is the best place to find yourself, Jason?
LinkedIn really is where most of my social activity happens is on LinkedIn. I've been sort of working on an Instagram thing recently, just posting some stuff on Instagram, and I've been a bit more visible there, but realistically LinkedIn is where you'll find me, Jason Lear, on LinkedIn. I'm always happy, just drop me a message there, DM me or anything like that. And I'll always respond to any messages or comments I get. And
Brilliant.
I suppose that's the easiest way to find me without having to worry about finding emails or sharing emails and stuff.
Yeah.
You'll always find me about LinkedIn. I'm always quite in tune with it on a daily basis.
Very good, very good. Well, look, even before we wrap up, just a few quick questions. You've talked a lot about what are your own core values, be that in business and life, that have shaped everything that you're doing now?
Caring, I think, is the one value that I carry. And what I mean by that is caring what you do, caring for the people that you connect with. And so literally that's my one single value, is just caring
Brilliant.
about it all. And if you go in just thinking that way, every other value just feeds into that. Whether it's because I care about the people I connected with, then we're talking about teamship. If I care about, I'm respecting you, as I always say, it's an easy thing. If we all had one value, which is just care, all other values feed into it.
Brilliant. Simple but powerful.
Yeah.
I like it. And any book recommendations on behaviour leadership, or just general one that's really thought, you know what, this has helped me, but I would recommend this.
If you're really into behavioral science and you want to understand how we're all being manipulated, Nudge is a really good read for anybody starting out on that journey. Alchemy is really good by what's his name, the behavioral scientist, Rory Sutherland. His book Alchemy is really, really interesting read. Again, it's very much done that theme of that sort of that book Nudge. Would be what I would call the easier reads, in terms of those sites, because what they do in those books is give you real life examples of how we're being manipulated. Just let's see, and everything from good to bad. Some of the stories that you tell, and then like if you're into organizational culture and stuff like that, look up. You can't go by Amy Edmondson's literature. Any books she's written, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Amy, I would class her as the real culture guru, because she talks around, it's very much just understanding fear within a business and what fear is and why it exists within an environment. And once you understand that, you can start to work a lot of stuff out for yourself. And I think then sport-wise, The Winning Game would be a really good book. It's about it's a tennis coach writes that, and that's a lot around labeling and how to overcome labeling.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, there's some good recommendations there, definitely.
Yeah.
If you had a magic wand and you wanted to change one thing, what would it be?
One thing. To be honest with you, because of my passion, I think I would change the education system.
Okay.
And what I mean, not radically change it. I think I would first of all, I would give young people a better say on what they're being taught, get them more involved in the design of curriculum, and link that to businesses, what's happening in the world today. We're still teaching stuff from the 1920s, what was built around surviving in the 1920s. And I think we need to match curriculum to what's really happening today a bit better. And then I think the next element of that is I would stop anybody going to university at the age of 18. I think university you should have a 2-year period of going to work and then have an option to go to university.
Interesting.
I think we have too many young people spending 3 years, 4 years at university that the only thing it does is give them debt.
Yeah.
It'll never increase their income. It will never benefit them in terms of their working careers. And I know some people do it for creatives and that's fine. But I think the majority of people that are going to university are coming out with something that adds no value.
Very good.
And I think the way we add that value is give them 2 years of work, because I made better choices. I know my daughter went to university, went to work first of all, and then went back to university, and she ended up doing a degree that matched what she was doing.
Yeah.
Do you not think like there's a very easy conversation to be had with young people when they're thinking about university, and it's just it's a question with two sides to it, and it is think about what you're about to do for the next 4 years, and now ask yourself one question: are you putting yourself into debt, or are you making an investment?
Mm.
How are you going to recover? So we all know there's money, it's going to cost us money to be there. How do you intend, based on that investment of 4 years of your time, how is that investment going to pay you back over the next 10 years? So if you say to the end of that, well, it's not really, I'm going to end up working in Tesco's, then what's the purpose of the university? You know what I mean? Why are you going there? But if you turn around and say, well, I'm going to be a physio, so that'll give me this 100%. If I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a solicitor, if you can make that decision at that such early stage, then that is an investment. But the problem is we have too many people going into debt.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what they want to do. So they go to university for the social reasons, the camaraderie and all that, having a student life. We need to help them make better decisions about what topics they take on and what decisions they make, because I just think we have too many people spending 4 years of their life getting a piece of paper that adds no value.
They're calling Transform Ed. So they have a new curriculum. They put it out there, what it would look like. And that dialogue between students they had, but that thing, how does it transfer in the real world, would be very interesting. I work with schools, I was a lad, and they put out this thing, TPL, so it's Teacher Professional Learning. Fantastic for business like myself now, because it gives people, we have a resource, we're online, where we can educate teachers to deliver better PE, but we're trying to give them a better understanding on the behaviour of, it's not PE, you're learning a skill, but it's a physical activity, and how that links to social, emotional, and academic performance, what it does in the brain. And they're trying to teach them that, to say, okay, why is just not a movement break? The movement break is for these reasons. And maybe, like, there's a brilliant book we always recommend, is Spark, and it's all about how physical activity helps academic performance because of the protein that's released in the brain, where it's released, how we can focus and concentrate more. It's like, boom. So that's my mission when it comes to it. But now I'm thinking, how can I intertwine this into a day? But for me, then it's comes back to the term physical literacy. We're trying to keep our kids active and healthy so they can participate in physical activity for the rest of their life. Yeah. It's not like you said with university. Is this something that you can participate and do, not for the rest of your life, but for a chunk where you're going to learn, maybe get your debt cleared, but where's it going to take you to? Is it the next step that you feel in your hang? And at that age, when the brain is not even fully developed until they're 25, 24, 26.
Yeah.
So
I think it's that thing, isn't it? When you start to look at sort of people's behaviour, attachment to certain things, when you look at PE in school, traditionally that meant sport. It meant playing a sport, doing a sport. And then those that we talk around neurodiverse and things that literally don't want to play sports, they would have seen that as sensory reasons. They would have put in avoidance behaviours or things like that, that what we need to do is look at what is physical, how many elements does that up, and what does that mean? So if we could get somebody, could we say physical activity is we get somebody out doing a 5-mile walk, give them a camera, and that gives them their physical activity, you know what I mean? Put them on a bike and send them somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that restrictions in curriculum that to do it, because we have 30 or 40 people, we have to do what the majority likes most, which is let's get them to kick a ball about, let's get them to do one thing. So we tend to, and that is restrictions of resources and everything else that goes with that. That's no fault of the school. That is no fault of the PE teacher. They have 30 people coming in and I have to do what the majority works for the majority. How do we serve the minority? How do we help these minorities? And what does that look like in terms of societal cost? And I've always said, I would be happy to pay an extra penny on my tax if we could ring fence it for certain things. But the problem is it just gets absorbed into something else.
Yeah,
and that's, you know what I mean?
It's very interesting because I ran a PE conference and one of the principals there, and they were a pilot school for an active school. But you talked about behavioural science of it. They started introducing like a walk into school. So they were Fort Hill Primary School, just in Lisburn. The principal and the VP went to the front of the gate. One turned right and walked half a mile. The other turned left and walked half a mile. They collected the children and they both walked them back together. But what they started to feel was, as the principal was like, it's the first time I was able to connect with the kids because I'm in the school and it's not, I know all their names and I say hello. But then after they stopped doing it, so they only did it like 3 days a week. The other days then, parents got that habit, got that confidence up to say, okay, now they're safe enough to go. The P7's then leading it. They then used to do scooting into school so they could scoot into school. Then they ran a scooting after school club so they could scoot pre and post. They then, at the start of the day, the girls love TikTok dances. So before the day started, they just had a speaker. They could put on the TikTok. The girls let it dance and whoever wanted to join in could join in. Yeah. So it was behavioural changes, really.
100%.
Like thankfully they took our program on as well. Our behaviour change needed to change in PE because it came to the stage of, what do we do? We don't know what we do. We're always taught dodgeball. Let's play dodgeball, everybody. Whereas we're starting to implement systems that actually improves their physical literacy. So then that they do have the confidence, not that they're going to play sport even at high level, encourage them, yes. But if their mate turns around and says, oh, God, they're running the badminton session down there. Do you fancy just going down and giving it a go? Yeah, because I have the physical literacy to know that I have the competence and the confidence to go and do that. Whereas if they have a negative experience in PE, it just has a knock-on effect. So that was a book recommendation. That was a magic one. I love those questions. What I've learned in business for me is, you know, a physio isn't just that natural path. And thankfully, my cousin's married the guy now who's opened up his own studio as well. And I got my son Josh to spend the week with him. And it was interesting because he nearly fell asleep in one of the sessions. I was like, but that's reality. Yeah. It's like, you're constantly getting these people coming in. It's repetitive. It's here. So can you stick that for 10, 15, 20 years? Yeah. Before you learn your trade and you learn your art, you're still going to have at least a good decade there of learning. Yeah. On the job. So is that going to pay you, fulfill you, give you purpose? And if it's not, that's okay. Yeah. But very, very hard decision to make when you're 16, 17.
Yeah, it is. It is such a challenge. Yeah.
But look, Jason, I think we could probably talk for forever. Thank you so much for jumping on. Really enjoyed that. For anybody listening, hopefully you have plenty of nuggets. Jason, very easy to talk to get on with. So reach out and hopefully he can help support you, your team, your business or sport. Thank you for joining me on this, and I will we'll see everybody soon.